Through to you, Mr. Mayor, the meeting is live.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first City Council meeting of 2022 on this Monday, January the 24th. Due to COVID-19 and recommendations from Waterloo Region Public Health to continue exercising physical distancing, City Hall is open for select services only on an appointment basis. Members of the public were invited to participate in this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting live stream video at kitchener.ca/watchnow. And I also welcome the Rogers television viewing audience this evening. While in-person delegations were not feasible at this time, members of the public were invited to submit written comments or to participate electronically in the meeting by contacting delegation@kitchener.ca. Any written comments that have been received have been circulated to members of council prior to the meeting and will form part of the public record of this evening's meeting. I'd like to begin this meeting, as we normally do, with our land acknowledgement. And so this evening, we gather on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. I'd now like to invite everyone to stand as they're able for the singing of our national anthem. And I'd invite members of council to turn their cameras off during the anthem. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'll take note of a suggestion that Councillor Schneider made to me earlier this evening, that we actually look at using the KW Glee version, which, as you know, they put together for us for Canada Day in 2020. I think we can certainly add the text to it and perhaps start using it in the future. So thank you for that suggestion, Councillor Schneider. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda. On motion by Councillor Ioannidis, the minutes of the regular meeting held December 13th and the special meetings held December 6th and 13th and January 10th, as provided to the mayors and council, be accepted. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any pecuniary interests for this evening's meeting? There being none, you'll note that there's a number of items that of communications that have been referred to file. There are no presentations, and we will now move into delegations. I do want to remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentations this evening. And our first delegation is item listed as 11C, which is a bylaw to exempt certain lots from part lot control, blocks 4 and 6 and part block 5 of registered plan 58M-424 on Hesh Crescent. And Jennifer Godet from GSP Group is here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I can confirm Jennifer has not logged in at this moment. She was only attending to respond to questions from council if they had any, just related to their part lot control bylaw.
Okay, does council have any questions on that item? If there aren't any, then we can deal with it. If there are, we'll wait and see if she logs in later.
If it would be okay, Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind just waiting, because it is a bylaw, we can move and second it at the regular time later in the agenda.
Okay, that's fine. We'll come back to that item then. So the next item we'll go to is 6.1, which is Corporate Services Report COR 2022-007, listed as item 7.2C under the Finance and Corporate Services Committee. And we have 2 delegations for that item. And the first delegation is Mr. James Etienne. Welcome, Mr. Etienne. If I can ask you to turn your camera and sound on.
Coming up yet?
Yeah, your sound is. I don't see you yet.
Oh,
Let's try. If not, we can just go with your voice. Oh, there you go. It looks like you're kind. There we are.
there we go. Thank you.
Problem. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Just a second here. Okay, good evening, Mayor Verbanovic and members of council. My name is James Etienne, and I'm a 30-year resident of Stanley Park. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening about this strategy to review the renaming of Indian Road. I forwarded a letter on this subject to your attention. I'll start by saying that I in no way dispute the right of Indigenous peoples to oppose, state their opinions about, or identify words or language that may be construed as offensive. I strongly believe in municipal and Indigenous engagement processes and know that they are crucial in arriving at consensus among diverse parties. I've taken the time to read the staff report and listen to the January 10th debate on this issue. The 2 areas I wish to highlight this evening regard the engagement process and the fiscal implications of the staff report recommendation. My concern is the potential for council to make a hasty decision. For example, I do not agree that council has a moral obligation to change the street name just because the Cleveland baseball franchise has done so. In that case, the blatant cultural appropriation of the Chief Wahoo logo was widely accepted as insulting and exploitative. The franchise has made millions merchandising the Indians' name and logo and will make millions more by rebranding. Still, fans attending home games are not barred from wearing old merchandise, begging the question, have their actions truly been sincere? The committee's sound endorsement of the staff report indicate the council is prepared to rename Indian Road for the sake of taking the moral high ground. However, while I appreciate the decision to act upon the request from a GRCI civics class, the student delegates did not present the case of students who do not see the need for a name change. Similarly, there has not been an effort to hear the concerns of taxpayers who stand to be impacted before an almost irreversible decision is made. I do not agree that the report addresses a one-off neighborhood issue. A debate on the need for a 4-way stop is a ward issue, but this strategy has lasting citywide implications. Calling this a Ward 1 issue has drawn limited feedback from a handful of students, some school administrators, and some residents of the street who may be in a conflict of interest position. More on this later. Unfortunately, the committee have advanced this motion without the benefit of a balanced debate, instead relying on a small pool of the like-minded to agree upon a path forward. I agree that the voice of the Indigenous community should be paramount in this engagement process, but the city's engagement with them to this point is not clear. We've heard it said that the issue has been raised by Indigenous groups in the community, but with no quantification or documentation. The Government of Canada recognizes Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination. Therefore, it is critical for Indigenous peoples to initiate calls to action on their issues instead of well-intentioned non-Indigenous parties speaking for them. Fiscally, I sense many councillors are concerned with engagement process spending, but accept that a stipend should be paid to the affected residents. If anything, it should be the other way around, with emphasis on procuring services to achieve the best result, if this is to be considered a pilot for addressing future name change requests. By my estimate, there are approximately 110 address holders on Indian Road. The proposed cost to assist in changing addresses is $55,000. That works out to a stipend of approximately $500 per address to be paid by Kitchener taxpayers. The report does not refer to a stipend for GRCI, which means the school board's costs for GRCI's address change will also become the taxpayer's burden. If someone from the city were to knock on my door tomorrow and offer me $500 to change my address, I'd gladly accept the offer, pay $100 for a year of Canada Post mail forwarding, do a few hours work notifying the DMV, credit card companies, utilities, banks, etc., and say thank you very much. The points I'm trying to make are, why does a stipend need to be so much? And if street residents have already been offered compensation, wouldn't their participation in the engagement process now be considered a conflict of interest? In closing, I return to my opening statement about respecting Indigenous opinions and the committee's comment that as a community, we need to do something to show good faith. On the path forward, we need to keep the steps in the right order to ensure all parties in the engagement process feel acknowledged and respected, especially if this is to be part of a reconciliation action plan. Otherwise, we may go backwards. Since this strategy will be the only time for all parties to bring ideas forward for consideration, my closing request is that the strategy to review the renaming of Indian Road does not commence with preconceived expectations of an outcome, but instead allows recommendations to evolve from a truly inclusive process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Etienne. Are there any questions for the delegation? There don't appear to be any questions. Thank you for coming in this evening. Our next delegation is Dr. Richard Christie. Former Mayor Christie, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. What I'm about to say to you, I do as the former mayor of Kitchener, an educator at Wilfrid Laurier University, and more specifically, is a loyal and trusted Canadian citizen who is appalled at the way in which politicians at every level, presidents of universities, and corporate executives have been initiating a destruction of our culture, our history, and our values by attempting to be politically correct while historically and factually incorrect. To my point, I believe that Indian Road should be celebrated, honored, and respected as a part of Heritage Park subdivision. I recognize the council is in a difficult position in a period of rapid social change, which the French sociologist Émile Durkheim called anomie. I also recognize that in this period of mass society identified by Tony's the German sociologist, who said that in mass society where public opinion reigns, there is the seeds of death and decay to the human spirit. But more importantly, I am concerned by the warning of the international sculptor and painter IYY, who says that in his culture, the government is removing the private memories of an individual country and whitewashing their heritage. This brings me to the issue of Indian Road. The name of Indian Road, I believe, is brought forward in the context of this subdivision, which such names as Secord, Tilly, Tecumseh, Tupper, Federation, and is therefore part of a historic statement of those individuals who should be honored, including the individuals and the community of Indians who sought to defend Canada in the War of 1812 against an American invasion. According to Jim Poley, a retired Canadian journalist writing on his people, he wrote in his book, Tecumseh, Shooting Star and Crouching Panther, that the name Indian, which he uses repeatedly, is part of the history of our country. And he clearly distinguishes between two important views of that term. The American General Hull considered Indians to be savages, and he declared, when he wanted the Canadians to rise up against the Canadian authorities, that no white man who is fighting alongside of an Indian will be taken prisoner. They will be immediately shot. By contrast, Major General Sir Isaac Brock saw the individual Indians as trusted warriors, as allies, and he particularly saw Tecumseh, their leader, as his equal. Make no mistake about it, Tecumseh did not join the British forces under any duress. He did it in terms of the history of his society and where he saw Canada going. He was invited in the year 1812 to a fire council called the Neutrality Council. And he was asked to remain neutral in this war. And he said, no, I have taken sides with the king, my father, and I will suffer my bones to be blenched upon this shore before I will cross this stream to join a council of neutrality. According to Pauling, he argues it was critically important for the British to hold the support of the Indians. This was a job and a much work that fell upon Tecumseh, who had to bring together the Indians, hold them together, and then lead them into battle when the shooting began. Keeping the Indians unified was a constant, frustrating work because tribes had a history of switching allegiances depending on which side was winning.
Mr. Christie, your 5 minutes is past. If I can ask you to wrap up, please.
I will. There were 300 to 600 Indians at the capture of Fort Detroit, along with 300 soldiers of the British troops and 250 Canadian militia. Your worship, I have sat in your seat. And I know that there are times in which a mayor must give leadership and courage. In this particular issue, so we do not lose the importance of the word Indians and Indian Road in our culture, I ask you to provide leadership and courage as the head of this council to propose that this motion be tabled and discontinued for discussion. Thank you, Your Worship, and I will take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Christie? Councillor Gazzola.
I really don't have any questions. I unfortunately, for some reason, my complete system died out just shortly after former Mayor Christie began to speak. So I only heard very little of his of your comments. I did want to ask you what your background is, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but when you're not being involved with the community as mayor or some other job, what do you do for a living?
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. When I left politics, I returned to Wilfrid Laurier University. I have a master's degree in sociology and history from Laurier, an MA from the University of Waterloo, and a PhD in industrial sociology and education from U of T. Since leaving public life, I have given papers at Cambridge University, the University of Southern California, the American University in Paris, Cambridge University, and the Imperial University in London, England. And currently, I am at Wilfrid Laurier University, but also am the executive advisor to a law firm in the city of Kitchener.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, former mayor. I just wanted to point out that perhaps you do have qualifications to talk about this topic. Thank you very much for your presence.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Schneider.
Mayor Verbanovic, thank you, Richard, for coming in tonight. I know you gave a portion of some of the history, but you know, one of the big issues that we struggle with is the residential school situation and how that was designed to take away culture. Can you maybe talk to that portion of history?
Well, what I didn't come prepared, let me just say this. I've written a letter to the president of Ryerson University and said that I believe that Ryerson would be the first to congratulate him from taking his name off of the university, because he knows nothing at all about the importance of Ryerson to the educational system of then Upper Canada. In 1847, he passed the School Act, in which he declared that education should not be reserved for government leaders, professionals, and business people. It should be for everyone, and that school fees should be eliminated or reduced, and that any group of parents who had 5 residents or more could form a school board to hire a teacher to set curriculum and to educate their children. That legislation is part of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Section 24, in which it states education should be available to everyone, and it should be free, at least at the elementary level. And the UN sent 2014 2015 is the year in which that should be available. There are 240 million children around the world who do not have education. So the United Nations is making that goal for 2030. You and I are focused on the residential schools. But if you listen or read the article by Jim Bissett, he said he was thankful for the Roman Catholic Church, particularly Sister Rita, who not only educated them, but administered to their sicknesses and their problems. He writes that in the 1930s, they lived in abject poverty, no housing, no way of moving from a nomadic people to a settled people. And the Roman Catholic Church, as he says, there were some who were bad. The Roman Catholic Church brought us all that we needed to move into this new era. So, Councillor Snyder, I would say you can't mix the two of you. I do agree with the letter from the grade 10 students in Stanley Park. But what they are doing, rather than pointing out the history of such leaders as Tecumseh or the Indians who sided with the British to push back the invading Americans, some Canadians don't even know that the Americans declared war on Canada. And in June 12th of 1818, General Hull invaded Canadians. And if it were not for the 300 to 600 native warriors fighting with General Sir Isaac Brock, you and I believe, would not have been playing O Canada as our national anthem. Let us be not only historically, but let us be factually correct. If you pass this resolution, in my view, you are declaring that the implication is that Indian word is for savage, not for noble leader. And the students in grade 10 are correct.
Mr. Christie, I appreciate that, but you haven't answered my question. You're
Yes.
giving another history lesson.
All
And
right.
we've heard from the Indigenous people. And the residential school system has caused a lot of pain, generational pain, and continues to this day. It hurts them. So we can talk about all the history we want, but their experience is much different. And that's what we're reacting to. And this is going to be a lot of engagement. It's going to be a learning for both sides. So I just wanted to point, I don't begrudge you your knowledge of history, but this is what we are told. We've done Indigenous education on council and learned a lot. And there's a lot of pain, a generational pain that we want to do something about. And this is, I understand, very, very small.
Well, let me
But
just
it's
interrupt
very,
you
very
there.
necessary.
Yes, you're right. I gave you a macro view. Let me give you a micro view.
If I can ask for a.
No, but you know what? It's okay. You know what? You
Okay.
didn't answer my question, and that's fine.
Well, I'll just tell you that Sierra Miller, who is now doing her Master's of Childhood Education, asked me when she was a student if she could write a paper on residential schools. As an Indigenous woman, I said, "Did you go to one?" And she said, "No." I said, "Did your parents?" She said, "No." My aunt did, and she said they were the best years of her life. And my paper will be balanced to deal with both sides of the issue.
Okay. Councillor Chapman, do you have a question for Mayor Christie, or former Mayor Christie, rather?
Yes, thank you for coming in and for the history lesson. But my question to you is, do you have any experience engaging with the Indigenous community around this particular issue of the renaming of sites or streets or whatever, like in your research or in your community engagement?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Chapman. At Laurier, right now, there are 550 registered Indigenous students from 160 tribal groups. I have worked with students, just as I mentioned Sierra Miller. One of my students a number of years ago, at least 5 years ago, said that he didn't identify as an Indigenous man because he was bullied by other Indigenous students at Laurier, who called him an apple, red on the outside, white on the inside, because he wanted to succeed.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, to be honest.
Councillor Singh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the context of the answers to the question. The delegate, I think, is going into detail of a subject matter that's important or he wants to bring light of, but that's not necessarily question at hand and not necessarily the question that's being asked of. And I think this council is giving unnecessary time to a delegate beyond his delegation that was already the time allotted. So I would request that the delegate be specific to the questions that are being asked at the interest of this council.
Mr. Christie, if you can answer Councillor Chapman's question, or we'll have to move on.
Well, I think Councillor Chapman asked me if I worked with Indigenous people. Am I correct?
He had asked if he had consulted specific to the subject matter. Have you consulted with Indigenous people regarding your opinion on the changing Indian Road?
No, I have not.
That you're working with students at Laurier.
Okay,
No, I have not, but I do believe that it's relevant to know that there is a diverse opinion. And as Councillor Snyder says, you have received some training in this area, but there's a world of diversity in terms of what Indigenous people think about, including Mr. Rowling, who uses the word Indian consistently in his analysis of the history of the World War.
Mr. Christie, in all due respect, Councillor Chapman asked a question. You've answered it. Councillor Chapman, do you have any more questions?
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Christie, for coming in this evening.
You're welcome.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock, if I can ask you to bring forward the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Scott Davey that the strategy to review the renaming of Indian Road as in report COR 2022-007 be approved.
Okay, thank you. Do we have comments? Councillor Gazzola.
I have comments later on. I have several questions that I would like to go through if I could. The first thing is that I'd really like to know what exactly are we approving this evening? Can someone please?
Well, Councillor Gazzola, we dealt with that at committee. I believe you were at committee. Did you get your answer there?
No, I didn't get the answer.
Okay, then I'll ask.
The recommendation, I have it before me, says that council approve the strategy outlined for the review for renaming Indian Road. Okay, the reason
That's correct, Councillor Gazzola, and the report, as you know, would have been part of the agenda at committee, and committee would have dealt with it.
I want to know if this council has passed a resolution changing the name Indian Road. Has there been a resolution to that effect? Are we going to deal with something that hasn't happened yet?
Okay, I'll ask Ms. Morlag-Silk to answer your question. Ms. Morlag-Silk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in response to your question, Councillor Gazzola, what we're asking council to approve is to undertake a review around the decision to rename Indian Road. So this is not a decision to name Indian Road, right? To rename Indian Road, sorry. This is a review to do the engagement necessary around the renaming of Indian Road. And so just to be clear, there are 3 groups that are outlined in the report that we will be engaging with. And those include residents on the street, students who attend the school on Indian Road, which is Grand River Collegiate, and local Indigenous communities. And throughout the process of that engagement, we will be collecting data and information from all of those three groups in terms of who we talk to, different kinds of engagement, and gathering information as to whether we should go ahead to rename the street. So the reason that I have in the entire strategy, I do have in phase 3 and 4, we will be reporting back to council. So once all of that engagement happens, we will develop a staff report that will outline the recommendations to council, which will include an overview of citizen engagement and a list of options for the new road name for council consideration, if that is what the decision is. So this is what we're moving forward here. So, and then phase 4 is to implement the plan as per the council decision that will be outlined in the staff report. So these are the things that will be brought to council, and all of that is clearly stated in the report.
Well, it's not clear to me, because here again, you said the decision to rename Indian Road. You said that in your response. What has that decision been made?
No,
Yes or no?
So what I meant was the decision to rename Indian Road, in that the decision that is made about the renaming of Indian Road.
Councillor Gazzola, I think you're fully aware that what council is dealing with this evening is the process. And staff have worked on a process in order to deal with this particular issue. Council will be approving that this evening based on the recommendation coming out of committee. That process will take us forward a number of months, and ultimately there will be a recommendation coming to the next council to deal with the recommendations coming out of the engagement and the work that's being done on this.
At the appropriate time, I would like to make a comment.
This is your opportunity to make your comment, Councillor
Yeah.
Gazzola.
Yeah, I have found this very confusing. If anyone wants to listen to the committee meeting that was held several weeks ago, everyone around the table it was a done deal. It was everyone spoke as if it's completed. Now, how are we going to rationalize it? Okay, I don't. I want to start off by, and I did it. I did it the other day. I complimented the students who brought forward this question. Now I do want to point out that they are grade 10 students who civics is on a curriculum in this province for grade 5 and grade 10, and they came forward. What I asked at that meeting, I asked for documentation. I wanted to see, what exactly was asked for. I expected to see a document, an original document signed by a number of people. I received a copy. I received a copy of that supposed document. It wasn't even addressed to the city of Kitchener. It was just said, to whom it may concern. I'm questioning, to start with, I'm questioning that documentation. The other thing I expected to hear, we talk about, we're hearing from a lot of different areas. I expected to see minutes from meetings that brought the point forward that people were asking for the renaming of Indian Road. I haven't seen any of that. I just, it seems to me that we've made a decision here without really going through a proper process. I mean, I'm really struggling with the issue. The issue was that this road was named. Going back to who was around and when the road was named, and what was the purpose of naming the road? It wasn't to slight Indians, to ridicule Indians. It was to honor them. Naming things is done to honor people. And this was done, and it was done when we're honoring people, and when we're dealing with celebrations. From what I can understand, it was done at a time when we were celebrating Confederation, and that is brought out by the names of the streets all around this area. It's in Wolf and Montcalm and Tupper and McGee, Tecumseh, and Indian. Indian were an important part of this land and of our Confederation. In those days, the word Indian was properly used. Perhaps in those days, if the word indigenous is used as the word was today, they would have called it Indigenous Road. But in those days, they were honoring the Indians. And here we are now. We're wiping that all out without really, have we canvassed the people who live on Indian Road? We say we're going to do that. Fine, I'm good. I look at the strategy as to what we plan to do. That's fine. I have no problems with that. Go ahead, review the strategy. It's really a strategy for naming sites, and buildings, not for renaming Indian Road. Maybe we don't want to rename Indian Road, but we do want to look at how we do name things in the future. So I really, I've said my piece. I respect the right of this. I really question some of the things that I've heard, how this is insensitive and how people have suffered from that. I really question that, but that's beside the point. I'm all for. The other thing, I look upon this as really as something of a tokenism. It seems we want to start making up for some atrocities of the past, and we're committed to
Wrap up, please, Councillor Gazzola.
Pardon?
If you can wrap up, please. Your 5 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, I think we're just trying to do something to say that we're doing something about this, the whole truth and reconciliation issue. So when it's all done, I will not support it, and I ask that we have a recorded vote. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
We will have a recorded vote, and I will say, as chair, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to wait until the end to say my comments, but I will do that. Councillor Singh, you are next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And like you, I think I was losing my patience as well. I can honestly say with my comments, I think it is absolutely a responsibility to make better of past atrocities, to do right by them, to make up for them. I think as a community, as a society, and as a civilization, we owe that responsibility to ourselves, to the past generations, and more importantly, to our future generations, because we have to lead by example. This process in consultation is everything that Councillor Gazzola has laid out. It is not the naming of Indian Road. We are not presupposing that that is the action that we will, or this council or the recommendation will be, but it puts into motion the process with which we realize perhaps the insensitivity of that road name in today's day and age. That may have been the reference to the indigenous people at the time that road was named, but perhaps that wasn't not the right name. And in today's metrics, it's considered insensitive. And I think that is the right action that we're doing, being brought of that realization by our youth from Grand River High School, that it's important for us to have that reflection and consult with the community, the street, the property owners, as well as the indigenous people of our community to assess that. Should we rename that roadway? as well as perhaps should we rename other places that have also that negative or a derogatory connotation. Names that were appropriate perhaps at that time are no longer right now. This is the process that we're approving as a council. And I can't see that as a wrong direction, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Privanovic. Councillor Singh, thank you. That was very well said. This is a process, and it's not a slam dunk. It's going to be a process where we can learn and be educated and find out. And it well may have been that, when the street was named, it was meant to honor, but it was our idea of how to honor. It may not be the Indigenous way. So we are going to learn and be educated. And there's going to be a lot of it, and both sides will learn where the other is coming from. There's nothing wrong with that. And we're just doing, I'm proud of the work that we've done with equity, diversity, inclusion. It's very important work. It's part of what I want to be. It's the kind of city I want to live in, where everybody is included and respected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of speculation here of how and when and how and who. I just wonder if it would be possible to change the strategy name to Strategy to Review the Name of Indian Road rather than renaming Indian Road. I don't know if Councillor Gazzola, that would make it more acceptable to you, but it's not saying, we're not saying we're going to rename it, because we don't know yet. We've got this review, we've got a strategy and a review we want to do. So rather than it be a strategy for renaming it, could we change it? I don't know if this has to be a motion, but to the Strategy to Review the Name Indian Road. I'll throw that out there as a motion if it's possible.
Sorry, you're making that as a motion, Councillor Chapman?
Yeah.
Okay, I would need that motion in writing, and I would need a seconder for it.
I'll second.
Okay. Councillor Chapman, if you can send your motion to the clerk, please. Councillor Marsh.
I really can't believe that there's a desire to go backwards here. We have had a fulsome discussion at committee, and this is an abomination, actually, that we are considering going backwards. This is not the best way for us to be good allies, and this is not allyship at all. If we were to say that we're not considering renaming this road, I like the way the motion stands as we approved at committee, and there is no way I would support this new motion. Really, frankly, the whole decision to look at renaming Indian Road can be summed up by the phrase, know better, do better. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Is anyone else looking to make comments? Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be brief. The reason I've changed course in this a little bit, and one of the reasons is I thought from the moment that we started discussing this renaming, I assumed, perhaps incorrectly, I would have heard from a lot of members of the community from between the committee when it was first announced and today. And I'll be honest, the only people I've heard from, and not that I give them extra credit, the only people that I heard from are frankly white people that don't want to see it renamed. Like, I'll just say it as it is. That's what I've heard. The reason I'm supporting the amendment that Councillor Chapman's putting forward is I personally have not heard from a single Indigenous person on this issue. And I'm not saying that I don't want to rename the road. I'm saying I want to hear from them. Perhaps that, like, I've heard from some casually through acquaintances that are partially Indigenous, the spectrum from some that find the term terribly offensive to others that think that what we're doing is stupid, but none of them directly. I want to hear from them what they think. And I guess the other part of it being that people tend to work from what they want and then figure out the financing later. I tend to work backwards. I figure out how much money we have to spend on something, what's the best way to spend it. One of the things I want to hear is if it's not impossible that the Indigenous community comes back and says, yes, we find the term somewhat offensive, but perhaps they would rather see that $100,000 we're going to spend put towards an Indigenous community center, for example. That's what I don't know. I want to make sure we're making the best possible decision. So I want to be clear on my rationale as to why I'm supporting Councillor Chapman's amendment on this.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to speak? Okay, if not, then I will make my comments, particularly because this council will. So, Councillor Gazzola, you're looking to speak? You've
Yes,
already made your comments, so I will allow you to just comment on the amendment if you have a comment on the amendment.
And that's what I was going to comment on.
Okay, go ahead.
From what I'm understanding of the amendment is that Councillor Chapman is saying that we need to review the whole process of naming streets and sites and whatnot. Look at and perhaps with specific reference at this time to Indian Road, but from last week's meeting, I'm sorry, but I got the distinct impression that it was a done deal. The recommendation said we're going to rename Indian Road and then we're going to study it afterwards. If we're not going to make any decisions now, and we're going to look at the whole issue as well we should. I never ever endeavored in my speech before. I didn't even get to the money part of it, which is a major part of the consideration. If we're going to take a view, an open view of this whole situation, I can support that. Anyone can support that.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, focus on the amendment, please.
Well, it's specific to just Indian Road, where I would like to see it to all sites and names. So I will give in and support that, because it's, even though I don't like it's specific to Indian Road, because I think it's something we have to.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
We're no longer talking about the amendment here.
Okay, folks. Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
I'm done.
Thank you. Folks, I'm going to make some comments now. And I'm making them because I, as you know, was not able to make them at committee day because of a conflict with a provincial meeting at the same time. I will be supporting the recommendation coming out of committee, and I won't be supporting the amendment because, to me, clearly, changing the title changes absolutely nothing in terms of what was approved at committee, which is the process to consider this issue, to talk with all of the parties who have a voice in this issue, everyone from the Indigenous community, people living on Indian Road, people going to school on Indian Road, and the broader community. And this process will ultimately also inform a strategy for dealing with this issue on a broader perspective in the community, because we know this is an issue that isn't going away and that we need to deal with. I think it's important as we discuss this issue is to also reflect on our comments. And I have to say that I am concerned that some of the comments this evening, in fact, may have caused harm to some of the individual residents in our community who have been listening to this discussion this evening. And that concerns me deeply, because it defeats the purpose of why we're looking at this issue and why we're dealing with it. I think we need to be very honest. And there was a call for us to have leadership. And one of the things that I'm very proud of this entire council is the leadership that this council has shown in our work on equity, diversity, and inclusion. The fact that we created a team that is now fully hired to embark on this work. And it's going to be difficult work for us as a council, difficult work for us as staff, difficult work for us as a community. But we recognize the importance of it if we're going to build an inclusive community for everyone, where nobody truly is left behind. There is no question in my mind that residential schools have done undue harm to individuals, multi-generations of individuals. We have heard that firsthand, and we're seeing the pain that Indigenous individuals and that our country is feeling as a result of that. As a Roman Catholic, quite frankly, I have to say I am not proud of the role that the Roman Catholic Church has played in this. But even it has recognized that what happened was wrong and that corrections need to be made. And that is part of the work that we as a community and we as a country need to make in terms of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. So council, we've shown so much courage so far in terms of dealing with these issues. And I really urge everyone to continue to show that courage going forward as we deal with this issue, because it is the beginning of a long road of challenging work that we are going to need to do together as a community. So a recorded vote has been called. This amendment has been moved and seconded, so I will deal with the amendment first. Is there a desire to have a recorded vote for the amendment? Councillor Chapman?
Yes.
Okay. Didn't think that was Councillor Chapman answering, but that's fine. Councillor Gazzola, you're entitled to ask for that. So I will go through. Ward 1, Councillor Davey.
In favor.
Councillor Schneider.
Not in favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
In favor.
Councillor Michaud.
Sorry, could I just have a point of clarification? Are we approving this amendment?
We're voting on this amendment first. That's correct.
Opposed?
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm opposed.
Councillor Singh.
Opposed.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Opposed.
Councillor Johnson, sorry.
I'm opposed.
Councillor Chapman.
Favor.
Councillor Marsh.
Opposed.
And I'm opposed as well. So the amendment fails. We'll now deal with the main motion. I'll go the other way around. So Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm in favor.
Counselor Michaud,
I'm in favor.
Counselor Gazzola,
Opposed?
Counselor Schneider,
In favor.
Counselor Davy,
In favor.
and I'm in favor as well. So that carries 10-1. Thank you. Okay, moving on.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm Jennifer is now here for the part law control bylaw.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go back to that item, Council. Item listed as 11C. Ms. Gaudette, I understand you're here just to answer any questions. Are there any questions of the delegation on the part law control bylaw?
Yes, sorry, when I joined as a panelist, it cut me off and I missed your last sentence there.
Oh, Council is here to, you're just here to answer any questions, Ms. Gaudette?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. There don't appear to be any questions of you. So does somebody care to move that? Councillor Ioannidis, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Schneider, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you. We'll now move on to reports of the committees. And we'll begin with 7.1 Heritage Kitchener. Councillor Gazzola, are you bringing that one forward?
I will, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
It has been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chapman that pursuant to Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2022 V-001 be approved as outlined in Development Services Department Report DSD 2022-11 to permit the demolition of the existing detached building located at 178 Queen Street South, subject to the following conditions, and that is that preliminary plans and a timeline for redevelopment be provided to the satisfaction of Heritage Planning staff prior to the issuance of a demolition permit. And for those of you that aren't quite aware of that, that is the building that is on the corner of Queen and Joseph Street. It has had quite a bit of historical significance, but it has been let go to such an extent that it's really impossible to do anything with it other than tear it down. There will be development apparently in the future, from what the committee was told, that in the interim that the developer would like to turn it into green space that can be enjoyed by everyone pending the redevelopment.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Marsh, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, just a question. So if I'm correct, this is the building that in the part that fronts Joseph Street, it used to be Bullis Glass. And does it not still? Oh, no. Okay.
No, it's the next, it's one up, it's right on the corner. It fronts onto Queen Street. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's all boarded up, Councillor Marsh, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. We'll move on to Finance and Corporate Services. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yes, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Davy that the remaining two items be approved. The number one being the Brownfield Initiative, the Brownfield Financial Incentive Program application for 60 Charles Street West. And the second report being the 2021-2022 School Safety Review.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Galloway-Seelock. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions on any of those items or comments? No, if not, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Council. We'll move on then to Planning and Strategic Initiatives. I'll go to you, Councillor Chapman, but before I do want to note for council that we have received a written submission on the tree canopy target item from Ms. Judith Chapman, and that's been circulated to council ahead of this meeting. So with that, over to you, Councillor Chapman, to bring the report forward.
Okay, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh that items 7.3A to 7.3E from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting on January 10th be adopted.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everyone. Any unfinished business? Any new business? No? Okay. Regional Council update. Just give me 1 second so I can bring up the latest on that. Go. Okay, thank you. So council, just to bring you up to the latest with respect to the situation with respect to COVID and Omicron. Like many of, like quite frankly, the city and many other workplaces, the region is also dealing with an impact on staff as a result of Omicron. Currently, we're seeing about 114 staff out of our total workforce of approximately 3,700 who are positive or isolating. From a vaccine point of view, currently 87.85% of residents 5+ have received 1 dose and 82.2% of residents 5+ have received 2 doses. 12,299 doses as of today are required to reach 90% of residents 5+ with 1 dose, and 44,352 to get to 90% of those 5+ with 2 doses. In total, over 1.2 million doses have been administered in our region, with 260,000 of those being 3rd doses. 4th doses have commenced for those who are in seniors congregate care facilities, as well as some who are immunocompromised as per the provincial directive. In addition to that, I think you're all aware that our healthcare system has really been struggling in terms of illness within that sector, and they've been reaching out to the municipalities, universities, and others for assistance from a staffing point of view. The hospitals continue to operate near full capacity in terms of acute care occupancy, and as of Friday, the net total patients positive for COVID in hospital had increased from 151 to 166 individuals. The last point that I will make in terms of the vaccine is that there continue to be spots available, excuse me, at many of the region's vaccine clinics, and obviously continuing to be provided through pharmacy and health clinician partners throughout the region. And a walk-in approach is now available at many of the regional clinics, and that information can be found on the regional website at Region of Waterloo/vaccine. So that would be my update. And Councillor Johnson, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a question. I'm wondering if it's all right to say a comment and just a big thank you again to all of our healthcare workers who continue be working so hard during this. Again, our numbers have been going up with people in the hospital. And I know we were so good at the beginning of the pandemic of banging on the pots and pans and things, but I think it's worth really saying another huge thank you to everybody who's put in so many tireless hours to help everybody in our community, whether it's the people at our vaccine centers and our hospitals, our pharmacies, our doctors' offices, everybody who works in the healthcare system. So a big thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. And while we're in the topic of thank yous, I will note that this is Emergency Shelter and Homelessness Services Worker Appreciation Week. And I think, as we all know, the shelter system has felt significant pressure throughout the last 22 months of the pandemic, but particularly during this last phase of Omicron. And so I do want to thank all of the volunteer and staff at the many partners that we have here in the city of Kitchener that work with the region, us and others in delivering those services. I would go and list them right now, but I'd be worried that I'd miss someone. And so I will just simply go and include all of them. While we are on the topic of thank yous, I also want to acknowledge our city and regional staff, as well as contractors who last week helped us get through a once in 25-year storm, as well as all of the residents in our community who responded. It's been a long time since we've had a storm like that, that dumped as much snow. In fact, the University of Waterloo Weather Station recorded 33 centimeters in a 24-hour period, which was pretty significant. And we were lucky in that we fared better than Ottawa and Oshawa and a few other places to the east of us, but not as well as Windsor, that remained very green at the end of last Monday. But I do really want to, on behalf of council, thank all of the staff, contractors, and community members who helped deal with it, and particularly our snow angels. And I should remind people that if you want to nominate or thank someone for their role as a snow angel, you can go onto our City of Kitchener website and do that. So with that, any other questions? There being none. Just go back to my chair notes. Okay, so next is a notice of motion, but I'm actually going to just leave it until we get into committee of the whole and ask Councillor Ioannidis to chair that portion of the meeting, since I'm bringing the motion forward. And so we will move on to any questions and answers. There being none, we will then move on to the bylaws and first and second reading of the bylaws. Madam Clerk, are there any additional bylaws this evening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are two late starters from this evening from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee report. The first is a zoning bylaw amendment related to 1940 Fisher-Hillman Road. And the second bylaw would be the zoning bylaw amendment for 1673 Huron Road.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So it's been moved that leave be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, as well as the additional ones, and that the same be taken as read a first time and second time and stand referred to committee of the whole. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Galloway-Seelock, seconded by, Councillor Michaud, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Council. We'll move on then to committee of the whole. And it's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis that Council resolve itself to committee of the whole. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Councillor Ioannidis, the chair is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. We will deal with item 9.2, 2A, and that's dealing with your motion regarding Bill 21, and you're open to introduce your motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. And so it's being moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh. And I will read the motion. It's with respect to the province of Quebec's Bill 21, and Council will recall that we have previously taken a position on the legislation when it was first introduced, and are now moving into the period of it working into the Quebec court system. And so the motion reads, whereas the city of Kitchener is troubled by the removal of a grade 3 elementary school teacher from her classroom in Chelsea, Quebec recently for wearing a hijab to work, and whereas the city of Kitchener denounces Quebec's Bill 21 as discriminatory, offensive, and feels it runs contrary to who we are as Canadians and residents of Kitchener, the city of Kitchener embraces and celebrates its diversity and believes in the civil rights and religious freedoms guaranteed to everyone in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And whereas Ontario's big city mayors, of which Kitchener is a member, voted unanimously in opposition to Quebec's Bill 21, further, OBCM calls on all members of Canada's Parliament to support the challenge of Bill 21 at the Supreme Court. And whereas the city of Kitchener passed a resolution on August 26, 2019, to denounce the province of Quebec's Bill 21, which prohibits public servants from wearing religious symbols, including turbans, hijabs, yarmulkes, crosses, and many others. And whereas the Council of the City of Kitchener has undertaken action to address systemic racism and discrimination against ethnic groups, Indigenous peoples, and Black communities. And whereas cities are closest to the people and those elected to represent them play an important role in advocating on their behalf to ensure their rights and freedoms guaranteed under the Constitution are protected. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Kitchener Council endorse the current legal challenge against the province of Quebec's Bill 21 and act respecting the laicity of the state, an effort that is being led by the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the World Sikh Organization of Canada, and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Therefore, be it further resolved that the mayor write a letter on behalf of the mayor and council to the city of Kitchener to the Prime Minister of Canada and all federal parties, urging their support to intervene in the legal challenge at the Quebec Court of Appeal. And if the case moves on to the Supreme Court and if an improper decision is made, it would impede upon the advancements we have made on diversity, equity, and inclusion for all Canadians. And therefore, be it finally resolved that the City of Kitchener continue to invest in supporting local diversity and inclusion initiatives, including promoting the existing City of Kitchener's Racialized and Indigenous Supportive Equity RISE grant, which will provide funding to Black, Indigenous, and racialized community members to support initiatives that decrease inequities and increase opportunities for enhanced well-being in 2022. And if I can just briefly speak to it, Mr. Chair, this is an issue that's very important to many members of not only our community, but in every single city, town, region across Canada. I think many of us were, quite frankly, shocked in the summer of 2019 when the province of Quebec introduced Bill 21, because it fundamentally goes against the principles that I think many of us as Canadians feel that Canada stands for and that believe our Charter of Rights and Freedoms stands for. I know this particular piece of legislation has caused significant hurt and pain to many people of various religious denominations in the province of Quebec, but the principle that it stands for, in fact, has caused significant pain across the country, including right here in our own community. As recently as this weekend, I had the opportunity to meet with some members of our local Muslim community and heard firsthand from them the pain that this legislation causes them, and the deep concern that it brings to them, because it clearly targets them and their ability to practice their religious faith. This is right now a Quebec issue. Depending on what happens to it, it very much has the possibility of becoming a national issue. And it's one where it's important for all of us to stand up and speak out with a united voice. And it's why you're seeing cities across Canada reaffirm their support against Bill 21 and for the appeal. And quite frankly, to put responsibility where it lies, to fight this battle, which is with the federal government, and to see all of our national political parties stand up against this piece of legislation. So as I said, I'm moving it, and Councillor Singh is seconding it, and it's my hope that we will pass this unanimously this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, we have any questions or comments? Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, just want to add some comments to great words that have already been added by Mayor Bogdanovic. I think I should start off with first thanking him for bringing forward this motion. I think it very well articulates the sentiment of this council from previous motions that Bill 21, as Mayor Bogdanovic has already said, is everything but Canadian. I think it absolutely infringes on the Charter of Rights and Freedom of Canadian citizens and those that live in Quebec. And the worrying aspect is not just what's happening in Quebec, but this is an action taken by a province. And could this happen in other provinces in other parts of Canada? It absolutely can. All it takes is, one occurrence, and others see by example. And we have to stand up for this injustice. We have to stand up for this wrong. We absolutely, as a council, need to support the advocacy that needs to be driven to argue and fight against this, I think, wrong direction and legislation in Quebec. As a practicing Sikh and members of my family that visibly wear or practice their faith in a visible way with a turban, or friends of other faiths that visibly practice their faith outwardly, I think that's very much their right and privilege of how they choose to practice their faith, and for them to be excluded from employment, for them to be excluded as being part of the community at large, it's just wrong in so many ways. It's not an aspect of just not being Canadian. I think it's inhumane. And we very much need to advocate in standing up for this injustice, as I said earlier. And again, once more, I really thank Mayor Bogdanovic for bringing this forward and very eloquently laying out all the rationale of why we need to encourage this advocacy and continue on demanding, I think, the federal government to challenge Bill 21.
Councillor Gazzola. You're muted.
No, I just want to ask how the final paragraph, does the final paragraph relate to Bill 21, or is that a?
Mayor Bogdanovic, you want to clarify that? You're muted as well.
Yeah, the final paragraph, Councillor Gazzola, is really a reaffirmation of some of the work that we as a city are doing in this regard.
Okay. I see we have no further questions. All those in favor? Opposed? That looks like it's carried unanimously. And on with the rest of the agenda on the committee of the whole. Do we have a mover for the tenders, item 12?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can we just ask that the clerk note in the minutes that it was unanimous?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, well, do we have a mover for item 12.1 of the tenders? Councillor Galloway Seelock. Okay, we have a couple questions. Councillor Gazzola, are you still keyed in for a question, or that was from the previous?
No, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't have the information in front of me. I'm going from memory here. It's dealing with the gas meters that we're purchasing. It seems to me that we're not going out to tender on those. I wonder why. And the other part of it is that there's a substantial shortfall in the budget that we have. I think it's on a $600,000 item. We're short about $150,000. Is there anything we can do about that? Do we reconsider that, or what is causing that?
Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the chair, as indicated in the report, there was a competitive process that was done related to the gas meters, but there was 2 bids received that were disqualified because they could not provide the supply of meters for 2022. Our existing contract that we had in place with our current vendor can supply the meters in 2022. And so that's why it is being sole sourced, because we have gas regulatory compliance requirements that we do need to replace meters at a certain time. And so the price that's indicated in the tender report is an estimate based on the quantity that we expect will be replaced in 2022. But the actual amount will vary based on the actual amount that's actually replaced. In terms of the overage, we do have a capital account that provides for funding for small meter replacement. And so some years it might be under, other years it might be over. And so we'd use that to cover any overage based on the 2022 year and what we have to replace.
Thank you. The other point I wondered was is there a large increase in the price?
Through the chair, no, this is for a specific residential meter and certain size. So it is one type of meter that is being contemplated as part of the sole source award.
Okay, so it's not a large inflation increase. It's really to do with the number of units estimated. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, my question had to do with the meters as well, but I was just wondering, in the report, it says that the average annual spend is $680,773, and yet we only budgeted for $487,000. I was wondering why we wouldn't have budgeted for the $680,000.
Ms. McGoldrick.
So through Chair Ioannidis, we budget based on forecasted replacement needs. Based on what we have to do is test a sample size of the residential meters, and based on the performance of the test meters, that will determine how many meters we need to replace. And so we do have a 5-year strategy that the existing budget has been based off of. And in terms of the monies within the capital budget, we have a total budget of just over $3 million for 2022 for meters, and those will be adjusted based on all sizes of meters. This tender relates specifically to the residential meters, but there is sufficient funding in the budgeted account to cover this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just a follow-up question, clarification from Councillor Gazzola's question. So the report said, I was just trying to find it there, but it said that the amount went up 33, 34% from 2021. I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying the per meter cost hasn't inflated by that amount. It's just because we're buying more meters. Is that the case? Or has the per meter cost gone up by that amount?
Mr. Lautenbach.
So through the chair, the per meter cost has gone up, but the quantity also changes year over year depending on what we need to replace. So again, it's an estimate based on the number that we expect to replace, and that's what's shown within the tender report. The actual amount will depend on how many actually do get replaced and secured for this year. The main issue was making sure that we have the meters, and so that's why it's being recommended to sole source. They were the only vendor that could actually supply them in 2022. The other vendors were further out in 2023 and beyond. So it was something that we had to move forward with.
Okay, so that helps a bit. So do you know offhand then what the actual, maybe it's tiered pricing, if you order fewer we pay more, but do you know what the actual per unit cost inflationary increase is offhand?
I believe in the report and the indication of the 33% was representative of the unit price, but I would need to confirm that information.
Okay, so that caused me some concern then. So it's clearly we're regulated by Measurement Canada, and it seems like there's really no other bidders in this market. Is there? So they, like, am I correct in assuming they pretty much have a monopoly on where we can buy gas meters from?
There's not a monopoly, but certainly supply chain issues have been a bit of a challenge, obviously through the pandemic. And so that's one of the drivers, I think, of the reason why this vendor can still supply them for 2022, but others who would be considered competitors were not able to, because of some of those issues with, you know, getting proper materials or those kind of things to process and make the meters and have them delivered. So it is a bit of a challenge in the short term, and it's something that we'll monitor, but there are other competitors that we'll look to for future tenders as we go back out next year and years beyond that.
Okay, I'll leave it for now, but if there's any way that this council can help with any sort of advocacy to Measurement Canada or others to change restrictions or loosen restrictions or change conditions, please let us know, because whenever I see a situation like this, it causes me some concern, and it's completely out of your control and our control. But thank you.
Okay, I see we have no further questions, so no one has any questions with.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, I forgot one quick question, if I could, on that. Apologies. Maybe this is the appropriate time you could follow up, but whenever I see this as well, I'm curious about where we are with, like, when staff's coming back with the idea of being able to read gas meters and water meters wirelessly. Is that still something that we're exploring? Will we be able to seeing that in a report come back in 2022, or if staff can comment? If they can't, they can follow up.
So through the chair, I can say that this is definitely on staff's work plan. And in fact, there has been a feasibility analysis done and a report will be coming back to council for their consideration.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see it. No one had any questions for item 12.1A with Highland Road. Okay, and I'll take that as moved all the tenders by Councillor Galloway Seelock. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Do we have a mover for the administrative reports 12.2A and 12.2B? Councillor Johnson? Any questions? All those in favor?
Should we not tell the public what we're approving, or does the public know that?
Do you want me to read them out, Councillor Gazzola?
I don't want you to read them out, but if you can just, we are approving.
Okay.
I think the public who don't have that in front of them would like to know.
Okay, we are moving the administrative reports. So 12.2A, board appointments for Kitchener Housing Inc. and Kitchener Nonprofit Inc. And that'd be including to nominate board members Karen Kipper, Sean Tate, Duncan McLean, and Jordan McLaughlin. And then 12.2, it's the citizens appointment to the Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. And then I guess it's to approve Aisha Muir to the committee. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And I guess, do we have a mover for 12.3? It's information. Moved by Councillor. You don't need one for that? Okay. All right, so it's been moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Marsh, that the proceedings and the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the committee of the whole held at this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes be and the same are hereby adopted and confirmed.
All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Council. Third reading of the bylaws. Do I have a mover? Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Galloway Seelock. Thank you. Any discussion? No. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And that brings us, believe it or not, to the end of our meeting. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Michaud, seconded by Councillor Singh. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Stay warm, everyone. Stay healthy. Get boosted if you haven't yet. And we'll see you in February. Have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.